Hi, I'm Peter from Knowledge Squared Thinking Solutions, and I want to give you 5 major pitfalls that organizations run into in collaborative decision making. These are things that I've seen as a consultant many times over, and I want to make sure that you guys can avoid them. Number 5, major pitfall in collaborative decision making, not involving the right stakeholders up front. Many times we go into decision making and we involve a couple of key leaders, maybe a project manager, maybe a couple of other people in the organization, but we don't have the implementers or those other stakeholders that have to live with the decision in the organization. And sometimes they're the ones that can sink it and make it fail after the fact. So we want to involve all the right stakeholders up front. Big pitfall number 4. Here's a big one that affects a lot of organizations. Not determining the decision authority before we start the decision-making process. And this is really important because you will run into conflict and your project manager may not be the appropriate person to resolve those conflicts. We want to understand who ultimately is the authority that can help us resolve those obstacles, those roadblocks as we encounter them in a decision process. So big thing there, make sure you have a decision authority defined. Number 3, and this is a common pitfall for us. Number 3, not ensuring that everyone has a common understanding of the requirements. In fact, it even goes beyond the requirements. Basically, what are we trying to accomplish with this decision? Hopefully that's encapsulated in our requirements, but sometimes we lay out some really ambiguous requirements. We want things to be better. What does that mean? Or the solution should be affordable. What does that really mean? It has a completely different meaning for an executive than maybe a line level employee. So we want to make sure we have a good, clear, common understanding of all the requirements in our decision-making process. All right, number 2 is going to be probably the most controversial one. And I'm saying it's controversial up front, and I want to hear your opinion on it, but I'm going to say that this is one of the biggest pitfalls that we see in decision making in organizations from a collaborative perspective especially. But number 2, here's the big one, is not allowing for flexibility in the requirements as we go through the decision making process. And here's why this is such a touchy subject. You might say, wait a second, we don't want to change the requirements after we start the decision-making process. Fair enough. We probably don't want to because it looks like we're going to game the system. But when we enter into a decision-making process, along the way, we're going to learn a lot of things. In fact, sometimes we learn things about a solution or a particular vendor that are very, very important. And if we had known these things when we were writing the requirements, we would have thought about them a little bit different. So we might miss out on an ideal solution if we don't allow flexibility in our requirements as we go through the process. Now, I'm not saying that this is intended to game the system or to allow us to just wipe everything out, but we have to be agile enough to allow ourselves to change some of those requirements or at least modify them in a way that's acceptable to the organization that helps ensure we meet our strategy. And then number 1, big pitfall that we see in organizations all the time, and I bet you've seen it in your career as well, we have rigged the system. In other words, we've predetermined the solution before we ever started the decision-making process. It happens for a lot of reasons. It happens a lot of the time. And here's what I'm going to say about it. Number 1, if you are a decision authority and you want to rig the system, you've predetermined the solution, and you still want to embark on the collaborative decision-making process to affirm your decision, let the stakeholders know that that's what you're doing. Otherwise, it looks like you're gaming the system. And we see this all the time. Usually it's something that we refer to as confirmation bias. You see confirmation bias when you've bought a car or a computer or whatever. You've already made the decision, and that is the best thing, so you're trying to make sure that other people see it as the best thing. Confirmation bias can hurt us. when we rig the system to support decisions we've already made, it's not collaborative decision making. So I'm going to suggest that if you're embarking on that type of path, or you find yourself in that situation, make sure that confirmation bias is out in the open. Make sure you understand what you're trying to do. Decision making is not easy. There's always an emotional aspect to it. There's no way that we can remove all the subjectivity from decision making. So we just have to be very aware of these pitfalls. Thank you so much for your time. Visit us on the web, www.k2edge.com. Follow us on Twitter at EdgeRCA. And you can like us on Facebook, facebook.com/K2Edge. Look for information on problem solving, decision making, root cause analysis, best practice courses. What we want to do is help you learn, practice, and execute it. Raise the power of the knowledge in your organization, ultimately move you guys forward. So that's what we're after. We want to partner with you. Get in touch with us. We look forward to hearing from you, especially on some of the pitfalls that you've run into in collaborative decision making. Thank you for your time, and we wish you the best of luck. Take care.